Back in 2013, the idea of a professional soccer club in Cincinnati wasn't even really a thought. Fast forward 10 years from now, you can go to the West End and find one of the most beautiful soccer stadiums in America, home to FC Cincinnati. But that's not how they got their start. They actually got their start right here at Nippert Stadium, in this nearly 100-year-old football stadium. And today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of Nippert Stadium, as well as the times that FC Cincinnati spent here. I'm also going to be showing you guys some video footage of my trip to FC Cincinnati here at Nippert Stadium a couple years ago. Let's go check it out.
Today's match is being brought to you by Toyota and the Built in the USA Toyota Camry. The best-selling car in America 15 years in a row. Toyota, proud sponsor of FC Cincinnati.
This stand right here is where the Bailey would occupy the first couple seasons.
Fifth game. Season tickets are on sale now. Call 1-877-CATS-TICKS or visit GoBearcats.com. We're Cincinnati.
FC Cincinnati fans, please welcome DJ PSP on those wheels of steel.
They would stand right there over the field. That was where the end where I think they beat the Chicago Fire in penalty shootouts, where Mitch said no. I sat right there in the middle. I was about 15 rows up in the middle right there. So the main tenant here is obviously the Cincinnati football team, but this actually used to be the site, when the stadium was much smaller, of the men's and women's soccer team. So I showed you guys Gettler a little bit earlier. This used to be the men's and women's soccer field. What a classic stadium. So Nippert Stadium actually got its name from a player by the name of James Gamble Jimmy Nippert, who unfortunately, in a tragic tale, sustained a spike wound while playing here on this field, and a month later, unfortunately, due to an infection, he ended up dying from his wound. So they renamed the field after him, and actually one of his uncles, the name Gamble, one of his uncles is Procter & Gamble. I think it's a medicine company, and his uncle donated money, I think, to help fund the stadium and to name it after him. So that's why it's named Nippert Stadium. Kind of a tragic tale, unfortunately. So the subject of my story today is not actually the Cincinnati football team. It is FC Cincinnati playing here specifically at Nippert Stadium. So back in May 2015, rumors of a new USL club in Cincinnati were reported by the media. They were actually founded by Carl Linder III and Jeff Bearding, who used to be part of the Cincinnati Kings, who were the last professional soccer team here in Cincinnati before FC Cincinnati, and who also worked with the Bengals. He also joined up with the ownership group. On August 12th, 2015, they announced that John Harkes, the U.S. soccer legend, would actually be their very first coach. They would break many attendance records in their first season. So they broke a USL record of 20,497 in their rivalry game against Louisville City. And then they broke their own record about a month later against the Pittsburgh Riverhounds with 23,375. September 17th, about 3 months later, they broke the attendance record again with a crowd of 24,376. But then they broke the record again by drawing 25,000 people for their game against Orlando City B on August 5th. They then would break the attendance record for a soccer match in the state of Ohio when they drew 35,000 people for an exhibition game against none other than Crystal Palace. I'm sure most of you soccer fanatics will have heard of Crystal Palace from London. They then broke the playoff record and single game attendance record again that season when they beat the Charleston Battery. I'm sorry, when they lost to the Charleston Battery in their first ever playoff game in the quarterfinals of the USL playoffs. So in their first season, they broke 5 USL records and they broke the attendance for a soccer match in the state of Ohio. I think that would signify the success of FC Cincinnati in the coming years. Then, their coming out party to the world. On June 14th, 2017, they played their first ever match against an MLS team. And that was against the Columbus Crew in the US Open Cup. And I'll never forget it because I had never heard of FC Cincinnati up until that point. I flicked on the TV on ESPN and they just had FC Cincinnati playing. And all of Nippert Stadium was sold out for that game. I couldn't believe my eyes. And I immediately was drawn in. And that was the game that GB Fall, who they just celebrated him at the FC Cincinnati game against Columbus the other day when I went to it. He scored the only goal of that game, and they won the game 1-0. I remember all the players went and celebrated with the Bailey over there. Here's the owners of the team right here. Martha and Carl H. Linder III. Looks like it's a memorial wall. I don't know, maybe that's Nippert himself right there. So then their next level of success would come against the Chicago Fire a couple weeks later when they beat them in a shootout. And like I said, Mitch Hildebrandt stopped 3 or 4 shots down at that end, and they all went and celebrated with the Bailey again. Unfortunately, the attendance of 32,287 was the second largest modern era crowd in a US Open Cup history match. And at the time, it was the largest because Atlanta would break it, I think, a year or 2 later. Unfortunately, though, right here on this field, they would lose to the New York Red Bulls 3-2. They were up 2-0, and they ended up collapsing late in the game. They gave up 2 goals after the 75th minute, I think, and then they gave up an extra time goal, which bounced them out of the semifinals. So back in early 2016, they would end up getting their MLS franchise. They would play here at at Nippert Stadium for their first couple years. Their first win coming over the Portland Timbers, in which they won 3-0. I'll never forget that day either. They had a huge march to the match. Everyone in MLS was here. It was a beautiful day for soccer in the Queen City. They would unfortunately not be able to replicate their USL success by making the playoffs. They won or lost the Wooden Spoon, however you want to classify that as. By the way, the Wooden Spoon is for the worst team in the MLS. So they got the Wooden Spoon 2 years in a row. And unfortunately, their final game would be played behind closed doors here due to the COVID pandemic. They would end up losing to Sporting KC, and that was the end of FC Cincinnati at Nippert. They would end up moving to TQL the next year. Didn't think I'd actually get on the field, but here I am. Pretty cool to be on the field where professional soccer players play. You know, I can't be the only FC Cincinnati fan that thinks that they should at least play one game a year here, just to remember the old times. Even though this wasn't like a regular soccer stadium, I say this is one of my favorite soccer stadiums that there is. I mean, I love this place. I'll never forget those US Open Cup nights. I'm sure most FC Cincinnati fans won't either. This was an extremely vital part to the growth of FC Cincinnati. When you would come here and see 30,000 screaming fans, you knew that this was going to be a success, and you knew that them building TQL would be great for the city and great for the soccer club. Nippert Stadium was a vital part of FC Cincinnati's growth, to show MLS that they were a proper football club and that they belonged in the big leagues.